You are listening to the Better 2 podcast with DM Needom. Hi, gang. Welcome to the Better 2 podcast. I'm your host, DM Needom, or Donna, as my friends call me. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting down with John McKeel, and we discussed his latest book, Giresun's Island, which is a take on a soldier returning from war story, but from a woman's perspective, a Kurdish woman's perspective. He talks about a little bit about the history of the Kurds, as well as women's suffragette movement, which was kind of interesting because there were some facts about the British women's suffragette movement that I didn't know. We also talk about how he moved from Alexandria, Virginia to Hawaii in the middle of the pandemic, how he had to leave his profession as a wound care nurse at a hospital, become a stay-at-home dad, all while having the opportunity to go to graduate school for nursing, and a dream was presented to him to be able to go through a writer's workshop, which he had to make a decision whether he wanted to do that or not. That decision ended up leading him to becoming a published author. But we also had some fun talking about Star Wars, Star Trek, and even the comics, Marvel and DC. So we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Hi, John. How are you doing today?
Hey, Don. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Good, good. So you are located in Hawaii, correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're on the island of Oahu. I live down in the southwest point of the island.
Okay. When did you move there?
And we moved here just over a year ago, last summer.
And that's kind of what leads us to your Better 2 moment, because you were a writer. You were also a wound care nurse. And all of a sudden you find yourself moving from Virginia to Hawaii, which had to be all in itself a big transition.
It really was. And, I've had a lot of different jobs and I've studied in a lot of different fields, but my wife is an active duty soldier. And so her career needs come first. And we happened to come on the list for this job in Hawaii. So I had to pull up stakes along with the rest of the family, and that wasn't a problem. But trying to move across the planet, we're halfway almost exactly from where we started during a pandemic, nonetheless. It's a challenge on its own.
I imagine so. I mean, especially if you have children, because then you have to. I mean, you can't. How does that work? Because normally you would take the kids out of school, and then they would transfer to a different school. And I understand they could still transfer to a different school. Did that happen, or did they stay in the same school because it was the pandemic? And
exactly. So we had an interesting lead-in because for the previous semester, we had the start of the pandemic, and so we've been teaching them at home, essentially supplementing what the makeshift online program was like back then. Fortunately, they've gotten a lot better since then, but it was a real struggle. So knowing that we were getting ready to leave, knowing that my kids needed support at home, I quit my job as a wound care nurse. I worked in a level 1 trauma hospital system, and it was a great experience, really thriving environment for me. But family comes first for me as well. So it was time to put my money where my mouth was. And we worked with the school itself, knowing what was on the horizon, and ended up gathering their records ourselves. And then I became a stay-at-home dad again and teacher for 5th and 6th grade for the next year.
Let's go back a little bit now. Dealing with wound care, people think, oh, I mean, that could be anything from something minor. I mean, I had my mother-in-law. She was in a nursing home before she passed, and she had a wound on her back that would never heal. So I'm sure you dealt with something of the seniors, but I'm sure you also had burns you dealt with that had to be kind of horrific and hard to deal with.
I had one lady who was caught under a falling tree That was one of the most horrific ones. Just a bad place, bad time. The chainsaw stopped, the tree fell, and she didn't get out the way fast enough and nearly took her leg off.
Wow.
But she made a full recovery. It was amazing.
Wow. And that's got to be somewhat rewarding when you see something like that happen, that you,
Oh,
even though
absolutely.
you're not the main person, you kind of helped in her recovery.
Yeah, facilitation.
Yeah.
Um, and it's amazing what the body can recover from. And it can be really heart wrenching to see something minor deteriorate despite your best efforts.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is literally nothing more you can do but palliative care. Keep them comfortable as possible and hope that things change.
Yeah. Do you miss doing that?
I do. I do. I miss the team I worked with was great. The environment was good, and I felt like I was helping people on a very personal level. When you're in a hospital, you're at the mercy of strangers, and so the relationship that you try to foster between the patient and the care team becomes incredibly personal. And so leaving that was hard.
I imagine so. Has it been rewarding teaching your kids though?
It has. It has. Definitely seeing that personal growth is along the same lines. I I didn't know what to do a lot of the time, so you go with what you know, right? And my background's in science and psychology and engineering and so forth. So we built things. We built model rockets and launched them from the park, which was great because we didn't have to worry about anyone else being around
Yeah.
because there was the COVID restrictions. We built computer programs. They got to play their own games and doing the math and the science alongside of the other subjects, English, history, etc., was very rewarding. And my kids are now in school in person, and they come home every other day saying, today would have been a lot tougher because of the social stuff, except I already knew everything the teacher was getting on, and I got the assignments done very easily, which
Nice.
then gave them time to deal with the social stuff.
So now that they're back in school full time, are you thinking about going back to work, or are you still going to play? Are you pursuing writing full time, or how is that shaken out?
Well, I've been trying actually to get back in, also in graduate school as a nurse, and part of that is clinical experience. I get to take all of my lectures remotely, but obviously the clinical stuff has to be done in person. And there, the COVID restrictions are working against me. Believe it or not, it's very hard to get clinical experiences, even when you're already a nurse, for school during a pandemic.
Interesting, because my primary care doctor, she is through a teaching hospital now, and she does still bring doctors in. So, there's still the permission and everything being asked, but so I guess it just depends also where you live at.
It's true. Obviously, the schools that are here on the island have priority. The hospitals favor the doctors, like you mentioned. I'm going to be a nurse practitioner, and my school is in Maine, so I don't fit either block,
No.
but I keep trying.
Yeah. Now, during all of this, since I touched upon your writing already, during all this, you were offered a writer's workshop during this
Yeah,
move that you had.
talk about timing, right?
Mhm.
I've got a huge move driving across the United States and then bouncing from there to Hawaii via plane with two small kids during a pandemic, and my graduate school is fully underway, and I get a call as an invitation to join an exclusive writers group out of Georgetown University.
Wow. Wow.
Exactly. It's the opportunity that everybody wants. I'd been writing for newspapers and magazines and quarterlies and so forth over the years since I was a soldier, and it was an opportunity I had all but given up on. And to get that invitation, I then had to figure out, would be better to add one more thing to this already inordinately stressful list and pursue that dream, or maybe ask if I could come back later.
And
whether it's a lack of good judgment or taking on another challenge, I went ahead and said yes, and it was fantastic. I can't imagine learning more in a semester and a half than I did during that class. And I was already an experienced writer, but there's always something new to find in a subject like that. And the wonderful thing about the program is you weren't, they didn't say, well, we'll publish whatever you come up with during class, but what they did do is give you the chance for an audition with a publisher at the end of the course.
Nice.
Yeah. If you don't make the cut at that point, they say, okay, we'll give you another chance, keep you around for a couple more weeks and see what develops. Fortunately, I made it in the first round draft. It was great.
Nice.
And when I got to New Degree Press, they were just enthusiastic as all get out about what I had proposed. We spent the next few months working on making my manuscript into an actual book.
Nice. Very nice. And sometimes, even though your plate was full, if this is something that you're passionate about, that kind of makes everything else less, I don't want to say less important, but a little less stressful, because then you have something to counterbalance things.
You hit it on the head. That was exactly how I felt. I've got all this stress trying to keep my kids on track so that they don't lose time when things do clear up and they go back to school. I know that if they do, then it's on me because I'm the teacher, right?
Yeah.
And then I've got my school for myself, and that's going to be how I provide for the family going forward when I am able to go back to work. And having that advantage, everybody likes having a place to live and a
yeah,
food to eat and all of that. And writing typically doesn't pay a lot. I'm passionate about it, but I make no bones that it's not a wealthy career.
I concur. I concur.
Right.
It's the same thing with podcasting. Those two things, while I'm passionate about them, they're not necessarily big money makers, but that's okay. Sometimes.
Exactly.
Sometimes. So you went ahead and you wrote your first book, and you wrote it from a woman's point of view?
Right. My lead character is a woman. She's a Kurdish war veteran. When I was stationed in Iraq, we had a lot of interaction with the local people. And the Kurds are an ethnic minority that nobody likes. But they're wonderful people. And so I had to dig down as to why. And it turns out that, there's a religious problem between them and their neighbors. But I wanted to write from a woman's point of view to see if I could do it, honestly. And thank goodness I enlisted the help of a lot of really strong women, many of whom are Army veterans that I served with, because they kept me on track. There's a lot of things that men typically think, well, this will appeal to women. That absolutely is not correct.
There's a TikTok video that I saw of a woman reading from a book, a romance novel that a man wrote, and it was atrocious. It really, really was atrocious. But that's beside the point. I'm digressing. So continue.
No problem. So the Kurdish people don't have a country of their own, right? And so they have nowhere to retreat to. They typically are either mixed in to the population of the cities around them, or they live in enclaves in the desert and so forth. And I found out why their neighbors don't care for them on religious grounds. The short version is that they worship the fallen angel, Lucifer. That is their connection to the main deity, to God. And that, kind of creates a problem when everybody around you believes that that is the embodiment of evil.
Yeah.
However, that's not how they see it. It's for them, Lucifer refused to bow when God said, you need to elevate humans to my level. If you love me, you'll love them. And he stood by and said, well, I love you too much to love anything else at the same level as you. However, he was caught in a catch-22 and was cast down for that reason. And because of his incredible love for God, that's why the Kurdish people follow his example. But it's often misunderstood and misrepresented, and they're seen as a bunch of Satan worshipers.
Well, that's the interesting thing. No matter what, and I will get blasted, I'm sure, for this, but no matter what deity you worship, they all have a common pinning. They all have creation stories. They all have similarities, but yet we put this whole big thing of how toxic everything is. We make everybody go against each other because, well, you're not doing what I'm doing.
Right.
But it's, if you really dig down, like you said, you can see commonalities among things.
Absolutely. Joseph Campbell built a career out of doing that. When I was a student at Arizona State, I studied comparative religion because I was interested in that exact problem. Why do we have all these commonalities and yet everybody's also fighting each other at the same time? The human condition's an interesting animal to explore, for sure.
Well, and when you look at, not going to dig real deep here of the pandemic, but when you look at what's going on right now in our world, we have a lot of commonalities. We're all humans, but yet our opinions are getting so toxic that, how can we get along?
Absolutely. And that actually fed into the plot for my book. The conflict is essentially the loggerheads between toxic masculinity, the super machoism, and then feminine power. And when they intersect, I wanted to explore some of what could happen, especially if the feminine side actually has the developed power, but because of the way they use it, they're not seen as being powerful, which oddly enough seems to be how it's handled in our culture, at least.
But we don't acknowledge it that way.
It's true. It's true. That was my other minor, was women's studies.
So is it written in first person or third person?
It's written in third person, and it does not have an omniscient narrator. In fact, it has an unreliable narrator, and the timeline is a little choppy, but it makes for good storytelling.
The reason I was curious is my first book, My Days with the Dark Muse, is written from a guy's point of view.
Oh, fun.
And I've been told that, I can't believe a woman wrote this. But the fact of the matter is I wrote it like a guy's journal. He's a musician who's got a drug problem, and you go through his life. You go through this downward spiral with him, and it turned in, it started out not the way it ended, but, it was just something that's why I was curious if you wrote it in first person.
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, I thought about it. That picking your point of view has so many repercussions you might not think about as you're getting ready to write, right?
Yeah.
But it informs every decision thereafter. You look at things like the Motorcycle Diaries, where Che Guevara, before he became Che Guevara, right? Or the Basketball Diaries. It's similar to your story about the spiral of addiction.
Yeah.
One of my favorites is House of Leaves, where you see someone descend into madness on the pages in front of you. That's interesting, especially when it's through journaling.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing about it is, so yeah, I wrote my first book and there was mistakes, and I'm like, well, it's a journal. It should be okay that there's mistakes. Oh no, no. The grammar police were all over me on that one. But it's very true, because I've written my second book that I started writing, actually my third book I started writing in third person. And my readers, the ones that I've shared it with, are like, no, I like it in first person better. But I'm like, but you're missing all these little points of view. They're like, no, 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 we want first person because I can feel it more. I'm like, all right, okay, all right.
To each his own, right?
Yeah. So you write for your audience.
Yeah. And, I think the story itself has a lot to do with, like I said, the point of view that you pick. But sometimes the story dictates what kind of point of view you should use.
Yeah.
And you can really feel it when you've violated that, when you're trying to fit it into what you wanted to do. Sometimes it fights back.
Yeah. And, as a writer, I'm sure your characters sit there and tell you, no, 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 I want to go this path. And I mean, I've talked about this on another episode, but when I was doing my days, I had this whole ending. It was going to be he was going to die, that his daughter found his journal, she published it, and I'm driving my husband to dialysis, and the character pops in my head's like, I got a better ending for you. And I'm like, but it's written. No, here we go. So then you play with it, you're like, yeah, okay.
Right.
And if you tell somebody else it's not a writer this, they look at you and they're kind of like, you're insane.
Right.
You're like, no, I'm not. This is how my mind works.
Neil Gaiman's got the great quote where he's been asked, how do you make your stories work? It's like, I don't. I just write them, and they tell me how they work. And it's very much like Michelangelo, right? It's a giant block, and then I just chip away the parts that don't belong.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a process, and people are like, well, how do you write a novel? It's like, it's everybody's own forte. It's a matter of how much research do you want to do. How much research? For your topic, you had to do research, you had to dig down, but did you look for pictures and images to inspire you? Do you write with music? What is your process like?
Oh, for me, research is key, especially in science fiction. And when I'm stepping outside of my element or my personal background. So one of the challenges writing for a woman's perspective was I had to find some archetypes to draw on Joseph Campbell to inform my character, right? So I went back through history and I looked for the unsung heroes of women's history. People like the suffragettes, but not just any suffragettes. There was this is a great story about a older lady who lived in London during the suffragette movement there, who ran an underground jujitsu school. And their entire purpose was to defend the suffragettes from the police and bystanders.
Wow. Okay.
So they would go undercover and then kick the crap out of anybody who threw a brick, raised a baton, or whatever. And it was incredible. And they actually have etchings and so forth.
Nice.
But they found some rare photographs of the studio and the women training and so forth. But we don't talk about those people, right? And so they make for great background information.
No, we don't. Well, I had a friend who took comparative religion like you did, and they studied the Bible, and she told me, she's like, there was a lot of books that have been removed from the Bible that were written by females.
Yep. You've got different instances, and in fact, multiple instances, where all of the theologians gathered together, whether it's, the Nicaea was the big convention everybody remembers. That's where you get the Nicene Creed for different groups of Christians, and so forth. But yeah, they retooled some of the story, and a lot of it had to do with removing references to feminine divinity and so forth.
And why is that? Why do you want to? It goes back to why do we look at women and think, oh, you're the weaker sex?
Mm-hmm. Right. And historically, it's not been that case. It's only been in the last couple hundred years of human history that we've, as a Western culture, focus on masculine authority, and we've tied that into our religiosity, so that the two are synonymous. But it hasn't always been that way, as evidenced by these books, these curtailings, and so forth. But also, the historical record shows a huge number of women in power who not only held on to their power but exceeded what the men in their cohort were accomplishing. Even in the United States, there's a fantastic history done by Thaddeus Russell, A Rebel's History of the United States, I think. And in it, he details all of the people who kind of got swept by the central culture, which absorbed a lot of what they were doing, whether it was, obviously jazz music and the Harlem Renaissance and so forth. But further back than that, like the Wild West, you've got these women who weren't allowed to have their own business, right? Yeah. But they turned into these economic powerhouses. On the West, we think of, gunslingers and desperados and so forth. But it was a place where people went because they wanted to escape the bounds of authority, right? Right. And so you also find these women entrepreneurs out there reforming the West as it builds its way towards the coast. And fascinating stories. Some of the biggest millionaires in those early states were women.
Really?
No, yeah, it's crazy. I mean, there's definitely a story arc for each of them, which usually involves ownership of a brothel. But the smart ones moved past that. They went legit, as the mobster would say, and got into every other facet of culture, whether it was building libraries and hospitals or owning mills, and owning the newspapers so they can control the narrative. And I think that may be why we see things the way we do is, like in my book, people in power end up doing whatever they can to retain power or to grab more, right? It's very predictable that way. And I think once we saw the power of combining morality and religion into a social structure backed by the government in England, people liked having that kind of control over other people, and it spread.
Isn't that funny, though? Because that's one of the reasons we left.
Right. Yeah.
I
like
mean,
any American who follows the royal family, I'm like, we literally fought a war so we don't have to care. Why are you in on this?
Yeah. Well, and going back to the West for a minute, I mean, now there's talk also about how, in movies and that, you don't see any people of color really that are cowboys. Well, there are, I think maybe Blazing Saddles had a small bit, but
I don't think that's what we're looking for in terms of representation.
No, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, you get what I'm saying. And how there were many, but yet we dare I say whitewash, whether it be women or people of color, because we have to have this narrative. And it's like one state is allowed to create our history books. Why? Mm-hmm. Why are we taking all this out? It was funny because there was recently, I had posted or shared an article back about the Oklahoma bombing, and I'm not talking about the bombing in '95. I'm talking about the bombing. Now I forget when it was, but it took out it was like a small area in town when it was all people of color, and they totally bombed it and destroyed it. Facebook, now this I posted in 2016 in Facebook, or 2017. Facebook comes at me the other day saying this is fake. I'm just like, it took you how many years to come through this?
I know, right? Was it the Tulsa race war?
Yes, that's what I was trying to think of.
It's the only time we've had American pilots dropping bombs in the continental United States.
Yeah. And I couldn't fully, I've been thinking about a lot of different things, so that's why I couldn't totally remember the story, but that's it. That's exactly it.
No, I've got a lot of family in Oklahoma, and it is amazing. You can live right next to it and not know. Of course, now it's much more in the popular ken. movies like or TV shows rather, like the Watchmen on HBO has really highlighted that. One of my favorites was Lovecraft Country, which unfortunately didn't get picked up for a second season.
It
Um,
was actually filmed at one town over from where I'm at.
oh no way! I
Yeah.
love that show. I'm a big Lovecraft fan, and I think they handled his particular faults in racism really well in that first episode. You take the good and then acknowledge the bad. You don't have to accept it. You just,
Yeah.
yep, that's how it was, and that sucks.
I mean, growing up in New Orleans, there was a lot of that,
Oh, I
you know,
imagine.
and it wasn't so much that it was blatant,
Hmm.
but growing up, I mean, I've over the years, my grandmother would say something that was inappropriate, or my parents, and it was just kind of like, why are you saying these things? And to see where we've gone back to, it has bothered me because it's like I thought we moved past a lot of this stuff,
I'm with
but we
you.
hadn't.
It's revolting and it's intense, and it feels like your version of the world has been completely undermined. It's been
Hmm.
built on a non-existent foundation,
Yeah,
and to have that washed away,
yeah,
that's
it's
yeah,
intense.
that's painful. Very.
So, are you going to write a follow up?
Yes, yes. In fact, I'm already working on it. You can see my storyboard developing behind me here. Um, Working on the sequel to that, as well as another project with a much more popular author than I. But he's been working in the field for the last 30 years. So I'm
Congrats.
looking forward to being able to announce that. But there is a sequel already in the works for this novel. It's already successful in terms of being able to pay for itself. We're almost to the point of reaching that first tier standard of 1,000 copies in the first year,
Nice,
and it's only been on the shelves for a month.
nice,
So
nice.
yeah.
Um, how do you feel about Amazon?
Oh, that's a mixed bag, isn't it?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
right.
Not gonna bash, but I'm just asking.
No, no. I have deals with 4 different distribution channels. I have to admit that Amazon has sold the bulk majority of copies of my book, whether it's the ebook or paperback. Um, yeah, that's a hard one. I do not think that it would survive or at least thrive if if the competitor could come up with an identical system and yet invest more of its profits into its system, into taking care of its workers. Um, the fact that they're being paid so low and working under these kinds of conditions, um, it's a lot of people would jump to call it modern slavery. I'm familiar enough with the history of slavery to not go that way,
Mhm.
but it's morally tragic the way that the company is treating its workers and abusing its system. Um, and at the same time, I buy stuff from Amazon. I'll fully admit I keep using them.
I haven't really used them much except for my author copies, but like Kindle Unlimited, everybody's like, "Oh, Kindle Unlimited's wonderful," blah blah blah. Okay, and I don't think they realize that an author gets paid like I think it's point zero zero
Oh yeah,
six. But I mean, I don't think readers realize it. They just, oh well, you're getting paid.
no,
No,
no.
no,
Amazon's getting
yeah.
paid.
And what did Amazon do? Watch me get kicked off. I hope not. But
No,
that's the thing. It's like I'm saying what I'm saying,
right.
and I'm running the risk of getting kicked off. But it's a fact. It's like they hold the market share. They are
Yeah.
the biggest market share. So how do you can't get around it?
Well, people would have said the same thing looking at a company like Costco and a company like Walmart side by side 20 years ago,
True.
right? Um, Principal difference is that even when Walmart tried to compete in that market by opening up Sam's Club, they were still using Walmart principles, right? And it is basically dodging taxes and dodging infrastructure billing, putting that off to the land that they're building their warehouse in, and making as thin an overhead as possible, right, in order to maximize profits. Meanwhile, Costco is paying its workers a livable wage, investing in its infrastructure and its products. And, I wouldn't shop at Sam's Club if I needed to. And I try to not do the same thing with Walmart. And it's not because I disagree with economics. I disagree with the way that they then reinvest in their business and the way they treat their workers.
Well, like the town I live in a small town, and the only major store we have in town, of course, is Walmart. It's a small Walmart, but it's Walmart. And we had a regular grocery store, but guess what? It
Yep,
went out of business.
absolutely.
So at a certain point, then you're stuck going to Walmart, and I'm surprised they've remodeled. I've lived here 9 years, and they've remodeled that store twice. That's unusual for them, because usually what they do is they pick up saying we're leaving town unless you give us a good tax break.
Hmm.
So I don't know if there's some, we've given them a tax break or what, but they're still here.
Right.
Back to writing, though, the one thing I will say about all the pandemic, and I saw this article, I didn't get a chance to read it yet. It's actually helped Barnes and Noble. More
Interesting.
people are doing readings, but then I saw an article the other day that says paperbacks are going to be harder to get because of the supply chain problems.
That has been a problem even the last 2 months, as I've had to fight through that problem.
Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting thing that they're saying the book market's coming back, and I know for a fact because I had friends that worked at Barnes and Noble, and the location where we were, or where they were, and I used to write at, closed down so they could put it in the liquor store. Which is not good, but that's what the town chose. They said, well, sorry, you're going to leave. We're going to put the liquor store. So now they moved that location, kind of, sort of, they're combining two locations. But Barnes has turned around. They had somebody else from England buy them, and now they're doing a better job, and they're letting the stores become more personal.
Yes, I read an article from their new CEO to that effect, and I think it's a brilliant move. And if you're going to try and keep a brick and mortar business open like that, I think a very smart move is to develop that sense of community. And you can't do that if you're picking out those books that were chosen solely on sales or the reviews from New York City when you live in St. John, Kansas. It doesn't translate. But if you pick the books and the subjects that people in the area identify with, you start rallying more readers and bringing in more people in that area. I think it improves sales for sure.
Well, one of the last nights they were open, because like I said, I was a regular fixture. Every month they would have a new writer's night. So they would invite, I think it was like 12 of us, 12 writers to come in. You brought your book. They were sold. Of course, they could not be printed through Amazon.
Yeah.
So which I get, but you brought your books in, you met with people, you signed books, and you sold them, and they were rung up at the register. And it was, so I can actually say as a newbie author, I've already had a book signing at Barnes and Noble, which is really, it's exciting.
Yeah.
Will it ever happen again? Who knows? But at least I got that experience, and it wasn't a huge turnout because they were closing.
Yeah.
Which actually, here's a story you'll appreciate since you are a writer and you love the craft. One of my friends who worked there, this lady brings in a copy of Romeo and Juliet that she had bought on clearance. She'd like to return it because there were 2 suicides in there, and she had no idea that there were suicides.
I would just give her money.
My friend was just like, somebody else is going to help you.
Yeah. I don't like it because they go around stabbing everybody.
How did you, and the thing is, she wasn't a young person. Right. She was an older lady. How did you miss this? Did you not see a movie? Did you not see a movie that had that idea?
I keep thinking of the movie reviews written badly memes.
Yeah.
I'm like, even if you went with something like that, you would still know that it has an unhappy ending.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
It's funny the expectations that people expect to have a happy ending in a book. And it's like, life doesn't always have happy endings. Why would my characters have happy endings?
Exactly. Exactly. And some of the early reviews of my book were talking about, the ending wasn't what they were expecting. Not in a bad way. It was just, we're used to having the heroes succeed, but not just succeed, but succeed meaningfully. There's no prize for second, in kind of a very black and white kind of a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I purposely wrote it in a way that was much more practical. It's like, that's not how it works out in real life.
Yeah.
People die because they tripped, not because that guy shot them or the good guy shot them. It's incidental. They wandered down to traffic during the gun battle and got run down.
But
yeah,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you're absolutely right in that real life, if you're going to try and capture it, doesn't always come out nice and neat or clean.
No. And it's funny because I was an extra on my best friend's wedding. And the reason I bring the reason I bring this up is they give us instruction. Julie Roberts is driving the bread truck and she's going to stop right in front of you guys and run right in front of you guys. And you just got to keep walking, ignore it. And I looked at the girl that's going to be my partner in this, and there's other people behind us, and we were all broken down. And I looked at my partner, I'm like, this is Chicago. Do you think anybody, and before it's cell phones, of course, we had cell phones, but not like we do now.
Right.
And, I looked at her, I said, do you think that anybody in Chicago would not stop and go, what the heck just happened?
Right.
No, we're just supposed to keep walking, going, da 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 da. It's like, really? But yeah, that's what they wanted. So once again, it goes back to what you were saying. It's like, so we paint this picture of everything just being perfect, when the truth of the matter is a lot of people most likely would have stopped, ran over and said, what the heck just happened? There's an abandoned bread truck. Somebody most likely would jump in the back and start taking bread.
That's what I was going to say.
I mean,
free bread.
Let's be honest here. There's a lot of big pictures. If you went with reality, how that would play out.
Exactly.
But yeah, no. No. just keep walking and act like everything's fine.
Okay. I was talking with another editor. It's kind of funny. He lives out here in Oahu, and it's strange because he's also a science fiction author. And there aren't a lot of us here, apparently. So he's like, I couldn't believe it when I saw a science fiction author next to your name. So we just had to meet for coffee. I'm like, okay, why not? I'm new to the neighborhood, so let's do that. And he's talking about, as a writer, when you talk to your editor, there are always little pieces that are so meaningful to you. Yeah. And they're tiny little twists along the way, little bits of culture and so forth. And somebody who hasn't spent all hours reading all the background material doesn't get it. It doesn't make sense. Why is this here? And draws a red line through it.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like you end up in hindsight realizing you just fought and were ready to quit over a 3-letter word that was in, 2 paragraphs. Yeah, but for you, that was reality. And for them, not so much. It wasn't neat enough.
In my second book, I have the girl, because it's set in the 90s, that she's driving a Volkswagen Cabriolet.
Oh, yeah.
She says to me, my editor says to me at the time, and she's a younger person, and she says to me, she goes, couldn't you just write a Volkswagen convertible? I'm like, no, because you have a Volkswagen thing that's a convertible, you have a Volkswagen Bug that's a convertible, and you have the Cabriolet. There are 3 different vehicles. That's right, the current idea. So you have 4 different vehicles. If I put a Volkswagen convertible, I said my whole point in my books, because I do write in the 80s and 90s, is I do enough research. I grew up then. I do enough research that if somebody is reading this book, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I had that phone. Oh yeah, I had that car. Oh yeah. That's why I do it. So you coming along with your pen going, sorry, it has meaning for somebody. It may not be you.
Exactly.
But
there are people who have made their careers out of that. Steven Spielberg has kind of gone that route and is the epitome of that period authenticity in movies. I can't remember his name. He's the one who wrote Ready Player One.
oh,
That story wouldn't exist without all
right,
those cultural references.
right.
Right?
I mean, I sat there, I went through and looked for the exact cell phone that would be available that year. I don't
Yeah.
want to sit there and go, oh, it's a Motorola.
Right. No.
How many different Motorola's do we have?
Exactly.
And while the younger generation may not get it, there are people that are our age that will go, yeah, okay, I had that. I get it. And something about, I remember my husband and I were late to watching Battlestar Galactica, the new version, because I was a purebred, old school Battlestar Galactica girl. I even have the soundtrack.
Oh wow!
From when I was a kid, I have the soundtrack. Okay, so this is how diehard I was. I was very resistant to the new one. So finally, when we had nothing else to watch, we decided we'd watch it. And we're laying in bed and we're watching it, and they showed the old school Cylons.
Yes.
And both of us were just like, Eee! And my cat came running in like, what the heck? We figured out she likes squeak noises, don't ask me why, but that was just like two kids, because once again, it was something from our childhood that was just like, yes! It was that
For
nod.
sure. So it's like the peripheral stories in Star Wars. A lot of them are like the games my friends and I used to play after watching the movies in the theater. We'd get on the jungle gym and swing across the pit in the middle of the Death Star or what have you. It'd snow outside and suddenly we were on Hoth,
Mm-hmm.
And to now see these little vignettes or ancillary movies come out where that's what they're doing, like whoever wrote this was one of those kids. It's obvious. And sometimes they label it as fan service, but for me, that's just genuine joy in the subject matter.
Yeah. I mean, when you were a kid, Star Wars, I saw it at the theater, A New Hope, I don't know how many times. I would say at least 15 times, because it was like Dad every week and let's go. And, when we go to my cousin's house, let's play Star Wars. Right. Of course, I was going to be Princess Leia, but because I was the oldest. But hey, what can I say? That was the thing, though. Let's go back to Strong Woman for a second, which I know this is just totally around, but she was a badass. She really was.
Yeah.
So she never. I mean, girls didn't look at her and go, "Yeah," but I mean, I wanted to be Princess Leia. Then again, I wanted to be Pinky Tascadero too. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say there was nothing to hold you back from wanting to be in that role. She hold her own with the men, and a lot of the times eclipsed them. That scene where they're breaking her out, from the detention hall. Yeah, like couldn't ask for a better hero.
No, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? Into the garbage chute, fly boy. I mean, those are the classic lines. And even when I think about watching Happy Days, I wanted to be Pinky Tascadero. No, she was the equivalent to Fonzie. So, so I guess I've always had a writer's mind, because my mind when I was a kid would go off into these little fantasies like you.
Right. So and I think where it starts. I actually, for a time, was looking at getting into the school board back in Virginia, because they were eliminating a lot of the free recess time. They were structuring everything. Like, looking back, that's when I had my most creative development. And if it weren't for those things, those imaginary games we used to come up with, and having an audience or more participants that could broaden your perspective, I couldn't do what I'm doing now. And
and that's go ahead.
No, it's invaluable.
Yeah. So, Star Trek or Star Wars?
I'm one of those weirdos who love both.
I
You know,
get it, dude. I get it. I totally get it.
yeah. I mean, I can't. I finally got my kids to love Star Wars, and I'm still not quite succeeding with Star Trek. My son gets the Kirk and Spock dynamic and the jokes and the scenes and so forth, but we can watch about half of one of the old episodes and he's ready to move on. And I keep wanting to bring him into Voyager with Captain Janeway because she's my favorite captain, I think, and I'm not there yet. So maybe when I'm old and gray and can't do something else, they'll sit with me and watch.
So let me ask you this:
Okay.
the new Star Trek movies, what do you think?
Okay. That is an interesting question in that it's almost a complete paradigm shift for me. The original cast's movies were, by and large, equivalent to extended episodes to me.
Except,
I always think Wrath of Khan is probably the epitome of the best Star Trek movie that's been made so far. However, when you watch it in conjunction with the episode where we're introduced to Sun Yun Kam, then it just looks like a continuation of the story. Now, the history of that movie is astounding, and it's like I said, the best of the Star Trek old school movies in that. But I like the Next Generation movies. I thought they were interesting, but they couldn't quite escape that same I don't know, episodic version of themselves.
yeah.
The new ones, I'm not sure they did either, but it certainly updated things for a newer audience who didn't grow up watching the serialized Captain Kirk story or any of that.
I will say the last one, which guess I don't remember the name offhand, but the last one, the use of the song "Sabotage." That was a beautiful piece of film.
Yes.
The music and all the action sequence, it was a beautiful piece of film.
I believe, yeah, the surfing metaphor as the Enterprise is drawing all the drones. Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan of Idris Elba. Having him as the bad guy, he just brought so much more to the role than just being a bad
guy. Yeah.
And I think that's something that they did very well with all of the antagonists. Benedict Cumberbatch made a great bad guy. I can never not see Ricardo Montalban as Khan.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, while Cumberbatch was great, Khan is still. I mean, it's like Yul Brynner.
Yeah,
I got one day. I was lucky enough to see Yul Brynner perform "The King and I" live.
Oh wow!
And we had, I think, second or third row seats, so I got to see him do it. And there was that man had a presence, and Ricardo Montalban had a presence.
Absolutely.
I know they've relaunched Fantasy Island. I haven't even tried to watch it. I don't know. But because. And it's not so much that it was just he had such style. And I mean, yes, you think back to his commercials he used to do.
Rich Corinthian leather.
Yes, yes. So I mean, there was just this style about him and in class.
Yeah, even shipwrecked on a foreign planet that had become destroyed, he was still the embodiment of class. There was this ruling quality he brought to the role.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But yeah, and then the offshoot species of there goes the name from the first of the new trilogy.
Okay.
I thought that character was brilliant. It gave a reason why he was time traveling and popping in and out and trying. Why would he be that motivated to do this?
Yeah.
The actor sold it. And I think that's been the greatest development with the new Star Trek movies.
All right. So then let's and I know we're going a little over time, but I hope that's okay with you.
I'm fine with that.
Star Wars.
Yes.
Okay, so you got the original three that are classic.
Yep.
Then you got the next 3 that are the first, and you leave Jar Jar alive, but you kill off somebody that could have just made these movies rock. Darth Maul was just an awesome character.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're going to kill him off.
Right.
Why?
Yeah. I have forever wished that somebody in production was listening to the fan theories and made Jar Jar the actual Sith Lord. I think that would have sold the entire. I would have watched the first 3 over again, just to see him become evil, or that the cracks in his facade develop.
Yeah.
And it would have made sense why Palpatine was also from Naboo and so forth. I would rather watch 7, 8, and 9 than sit through 1, 2, and 3 again. Yeah. Honestly, and I just finished watching the Clone Wars, the cartoon, and that is quite a list of episodes on its own. But it makes the first 3 movies make sense why they did it. So yeah, including Maul's character and him getting cut in half and so forth, and later appearing in Solo and so forth. It takes a long time. You have to be pretty dedicated to watch the whole series, but I found it worth it, and it made a fan out of my son. So
Solo was good. I enjoyed Solo. I will say, Ewan McGregor did an awesome job as a young Kenobi, and I look forward to him redoing the role. I do. The last 3, I'm going to say I enjoyed them, but I really, 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 I like the Zahn books. I really like the Zahn books, and I really wanted to see Mara Jade come to life. I really wanted to see her because she was such a badass. So I wanted to see that. I'm not upset with what they gave us, but I wanted Zahn's books.
I totally hear you. When my son became a fan of the series, I then introduced him to the Thrawn novels, and it has turned him around reading wise. He just chews them up. So yeah, there are some fantastic books in the rest of the canon, and the Zahn books are definitely up in the upper echelons of that list.
Were you upset that Ben died?
Yes, but there have to be sacrifices made.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, the old adage, you have to kill your darlings. But yeah. I mean, Rogue One was a superior movie, and yet they kill off everybody, right? So
you kind of knew that was going to be how that ended, though. I mean, you kind of had the big tip-off years ago.
Known it from episode 4, 1977.
Exactly.
They're all going to die.
Yeah. I mean, there's no getting around that one.
No.
Leia said it herself.
Writing it from the back forward, But yeah.
Which, here's a question for you. Do you write in chronological order?
No.
Okay.
Typically not. I tend to write in terms of scenes, and then my personal editing, is reorganizing the scenes until they tell a better version of the story. And that doesn't necessarily lend itself to chronological order, which can be actually hard to accomplish without losing the audience. Because you're in this one spot and you're going along, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere else, and that cognitive dissonance, you can lose your reader. So it's tricky to pull off.
I tend to write. I mean, I have scenes written for a book that's 7 books away. So
my phone is full of notes.
Yeah, and then you go back and you're like, okay, then you have to tweak the scene, but it's there.
Right.
So then I guess there's one more important question. So DC or Marvel?
Again, it's not because I'm ambivalent. It's because I'm committed to both.
I get it.
You look on my shelf. I've got everything from Batman and Robin '66 to Captain Marvel and Wolverine. Um, I'm a fan of John Buscema and all of the Silver Age guys, but I have a lot of stuff that predates them. I have a lot of stuff that came long after their tenure.
I
I
mean,
think
I can't.
Chris Claremont is the reason X-Men is got the fan base it does. But
Why can't we like everything? I mean, why do we have to? Once again, why do we have to divide it?
exactly.
So, The Mandalorian, yes.
Oh yeah. Uh, yeah. Again, it's like John Favreau was watching home videos of me playing in the backyard. Um, Everybody wanted to be Boba Fett, and it lends itself to the Western storyline, the revenge story, and I love the Mandalorian. It's been so much fun to watch.
And Apollo Creed's in it.
You're right. He does such a good job, though.
And then Nick Nolte showing up. That was kind of like
that was hilarious. I have to admit, putting all that prosthetic on Nick Nolte and seeing him actually act,
yeah, because
that
the most notable thing he had done in years before that was his mugshot. So sorry to say it, I'm not bashing. I'm just saying.
yeah, yeah. What was the murder mystery show that he did? Nicole Kidman was one of the other actresses. He was in it for a small piece. It wasn't Pretty Little Liars. It was
No.
It was something. The name was similar to that, though. Anyhow, I'll leave it for researchers to pick apart later. But that was a good Nick Nolte role.
I remember him from The Deep with Jacqueline Bisset, which is, yes, here we go back in aging myself big time.
Okay, I'll do you one better. The one where he plays the executive officer on the battleship Under Siege.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah, Steven Seagal. He played
Yep.
the bad guy. Well, he and Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy Lee Jones has been around for a long time too. But The Deep, yeah. I think The Deep predates Under Siege because if I'm not mistaken, The Deep was like 79 or 80. It was a movie I should not have been allowed to see, but I have a single mom. I had a single mom who she dragged me to the theater, and then if it was inappropriate, her hand would go over my eyes, and she shoved me down the seat.
Absolutely. We have family movie night, and we were getting ready to take our first vacation in a long time, and so I thought, it's brilliant. Let's watch. We love the National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. We've never watched the first vacation movie. We'll go ahead and toss that up. I must have had that same experience because there were scenes in there that if I had known that was in there, we would not have been watching that movie. Yeah. Not kid appropriate, but yeah, again, your mind fills in the blanks at some point or just cut scene. And
Stripes.
Oh my gosh.
I saw Stripes. I don't know how many times. My mom took me to see Stripes 4 or 5 times at the theater. And I have not really watched it, but I remember it pretty clearly. And there was a lot of adult themes that I most likely should not have seen at that age.
Yes, there are.
But it's a funny movie.
Oh, it's hilarious. Are you kidding me? It goes back to Mel Brooks, the
History
Blazing
of the World.
Saddles. Yeah.
History of the World.
Oh my gosh. My favorite though it was silent movie where the only person to talk at the end of it was Marcel Marceau.
I did not see it, but that's good.
The most famous mime in the world is the only person who has a speaking line. Yeah,
it's perfect though. Yeah, perfect when you think about it. Perfect circular way to close it off. Which, speaking of closing, yes, we've gone a little over time, and that's okay. I've enjoyed this. I have really had a few laughs. So, did you? I guess we're going to go back to your Better To, which we already kind of covered. It was Better To take that writing class, that writing workshop.
Despite the challenges, making it through on top of everything else, and actually, taking advantage of it, not just making it through, but really working it. It was definitely better to have taken that on than to have pushed it off.
And while I've talked about your book, I'm going to be honest, I have not said the name of your book because I'm scared I'm going to slaughter it.
I have lots of funny stories about that too, but we'll save those for later.
Well, you can tell me one.
Giresun Island.
Giresun Island. Tell me a story about it.
Okay, so I had 3 different editors that I worked with in producing this from manuscript to its final form. And the first 2 couldn't get through the name of the book, and their pronunciation of the lead character, even after all these months, was so bad that by the time I got to the 3rd editor, I had actually changed it 4 times.
Wow.
And it wasn't like full-on changes. It was dialing down the transliteration of her name until finally I gave up and I gave her an almost American-sounding name.
Wow.
So yeah, you win some of those little battles and some you capitulate.
Yeah, sometimes you just, as my husband would say, go with the flow.
Right.
And that's the thing. If your editor's having that kind of problem, then your reader may have the same kind of problem. And
nobody wants to root for someone whose name they can't pronounce.
No. Though when you're thinking science fiction,
yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
I mean, let's think about that for a second. How do you think that one played out in the rehearsals?
It was the 70s. I'm sure they really rolled with it.
Have we had enough pot? Have we had enough alcohol?
Are we there now? Okay. So let me lay it on.
Well, like I said, this has been a lot of fun, and I thank you for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Talking to John was actually a really fun time. We had a lot of good laughs, and it was fun. Even though I know some of you guys may not be into Star Wars or Star Trek or the comics, Marvel or DC, I still wanted to explore it. I had another geek or nerd to explore it with. And he has a writer's mind, so we get each other. We understood that. For me, podcasting is a passion, and it's fun, and I get to talk to some amazing people. John had some crazy, amazing stories, and you never know, he may come back. If you have a story, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can find me at Donna at better2podcast.com. We now have a website, which is www.better2podcast.com. And I definitely, would be glad to talk to you. We also have a Patreon now that you can subscribe to. If you really like the podcast, please share it with others. The better we can get the podcast out there, the more people that can hear a message that may resonate with them. Because as you know, if you are an avid listener, you know that each guest has a different topic and something may hit home with somebody and other times it may not. But most of the time we try to have fun here. So share the podcast, write a review. And if you have a question for me, or if you want, that's one thing I'm offering now on Patreon is I'm posting a list of guests that are coming up to be recorded. If you really want to be part of the show and have a guest answer one of your questions, that's an option. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Your support really, really means a lot. It does. And I'm so happy that I can do this and share it with you guys. So thanks again and have a great time and have a great day. And I'll catch you next time. Bye. You are listening to the Better 2 podcast with DM Needom.